Brixton Riots of 1981. But when I start this, obviously you're going to need a bit of background. You can't just jump straight in with the Brixton Riots. You need to understand what led up to them. So on the 22nd of June then, 1948, the ship at the Empire Windrush landed at Tilbury, near London. And on that there was 482 immigrants that had come from places like the West Indies. Now, they got welcomed into Britain because basically what they'd done was fought in the Second World War to help us. And in terms of this, it basically meant that any of these people who fought in the Second World War from the Commonwealth countries would be welcomed in. So it all looked really sort of good, and it was going to be really prosperous for them. They were going to come here, get good jobs and things, going to get welcomed into society. And Lenny Henry was somebody who was one of the children of the Windrush generation. Now, it's been in the news a lot because a lot of these Windrush generation, the people who actually, had children here and the kids were born here, some of these have been sent back, and there's been, a big scandal and things surrounding that. So what was life like when they actually got here? Well, first of all, really, I think the British government was hoping that the people who would come here would be people who they had shortage of jobs in, like, midwives and things like that, and then that's how these people would be able to get jobs. So bless them, the people who came over, they got loans for transport over here. They were hoping for, obviously, opportunities in, a better life and also in jobs. And it didn't quite work out that way. So when some of them got off the boat, they were obviously promised housing, and some of them immediately ended up in like underground shelters in the London Underground, so that wasn't great. Some of them had also been promised to go to live in London or, somewhere of their choice. And basically they just got sent where there was a shortage of labour, so that was, a problem in terms of that as well. And when all these West Indians started to, have houses and things near people who were obviously, white, the white people didn't want to live next to them, so it was something called the white flight. So they basically just got up and left and just, went, because what they certainly didn't want to happen is they weren't interested whatsoever of having these people living next to them. So really there was some racism in Britain in terms of that. And the reason for this was, it was okay when they came over and fought and helped in the war, but now that these people were going to be living here, people were a bit concerned. And also they'd be worried about their own jobs. And the people who came over on, these boats, what happened was they ended up getting jobs but were paid like lowly for them. So they had lowly paid work, which isn't really what they signed up for. And people used to put things in the windows like, sort of no Negroes, no dogs, all this type of thing. So really racist comments. It wasn't very nice at all for these people. And actually in the 1960s, Malcolm X came and visited Birmingham, and he was shocked. He actually went as far as saying it was as bad as any southern state in America. He was really horrified at the racism and things that, he actually saw when he came over. So this Windrush generation were obviously hoping to start a new life. This was an opportunity to live in, the motherland, that had always, looked after them. The British obviously owned these parts of the British Empire, and they hoped it would be everything, that they'd wanted. But unfortunately, it really wasn't. So as time went on, the racism actually got worse. There was no official segregation, but really there was in a way, because obviously a lot of white people lived in one area and black people lived in another area. So that's a major issue in itself. And something else that was a problem as well was in terms of these people, bringing all the families over. Often young men came over first, then they get the families to follow. And the government obviously wanted to stop as many people coming in because it realised, that wasn't really working. So then they started to do some, racial nationality acts, things like you had to have a white grandparent, which was literally like not going to happen if you were from the West Indies or, somewhere out in the Caribbean and Asia and things. That's just not going to happen. Also, it was things like you could have a temporary residence. There was also cards that they had to apply for that were like work permits, and you could only come over and live here if there was a shortage of labour in the thing that you actually did, that you did for a job. So they started to do that to try and limit the number that were coming in. But things came to a head really when Enoch Powell, a Conservative MP, did the Rivers of Blood speech. And the Rivers of Blood speech was really, really racist. In no uncertain terms, he basically said that it won't be long until the black people have the whip hand over the white people. He honestly thought it was some sort of invasion from all these people coming in from other countries. He also talked about their children being like pickaninnies, which is basically just like what they used to call the kids during slavery. So that was really bad. And then he said that these, pickaninnies were shouting at, white people in the street, oh, you're a racialist, and things like this. So it really did inflame the racial tension that already existed in Britain. And the National Front Party, that basically started to do massive marches and things like that, and like chanting racist things, racist placards with things on. So racial hatred became quite a thing in Britain, from it not being a big thing at all during the Second World War. So all of that is the backdrop to then what happens in Brixton in 1981. So there'd been something called racial profiling happening in Brixton, because there'd been a lot of crime and the policemen wanted to try and stamp this out. So they tried Operation Swamp 81. And what this meant is that plainclothes police officers from elsewhere in the country, so that people didn't recognise them, would go undercover, and what they would do is something called the SUS law, so the stop and search law. So they basically chose in 6 days 1,000 people to stop and search. And yes, you guessed it, all of those were black. And the idea is that you would stop and search them before they actually committed a crime. Now, the problem with this was bringing racial tensions to a head. And a couple of weeks before, there'd already been, a racial riot in Lewisham in London. So things were not looking too good in terms of racial tensions. So what ended up happening was it came to a head on the 10th of April because a man who was black, apparently being treated brutally, by police, and this rumour got around in Brixton, so everybody sort of met up, and then there was a race riot which lasted for 3 days. So the problem is people were just on the edge of rebellion here, really, really unhappy with what was going on. So in the end, there was about 300 people injured, and obviously there was millions of pounds worth of damage done in Brixton, and they were lucky really for it only to have lasted 3 days, so it was a major, major problem. But after the Brixton riots, there needed to be some investigation done into what was actually happening here. So the Metropolitan Police, in terms of this report that was done, they were looking into, were the Metropolitan Police, the police in London, institutionally racist? That's ultimately what they wanted to know. So Lord Scarman was asked to do a report, okay? So the Scarman report is about the Brixton riots. So if you get asked about the significance of that, you have to say what that obviously proves. So what did it say then? Well, it said the SUS law, the stop and search law, should stop because it was racial profiling, and that is wrong. You can't just stop somebody because they're black and think they've committed a crime. Also, it said that it was going to be an actual crime to be racially prejudiced in any way. So that was obviously something that moved things forwards. And it also set up a police complaints committee. Because what that was there for is if you think you've been treated unfairly by police, you could